With Bond 2023, one of the key pieces that has always hinged on being able to do grade reconfiguration is having high schools that could serve 9 through 12.
Okay.
And so with Bond 2023, building a new Midland High School, a new legacy high school that will serve students 9 through 12. We will no longer have the freshman campuses. We're going to be able to convert two campuses. The current Midland freshman will become a third middle school for the purple side of town, and the current Legacy High School will become a third middle school for the maroon side of town.
Wow.
So now we have room to bring sixth graders up, so we'll have that true middle school opportunity. And then that frees up space at the elementaries for growth as well as pre-K.
Hi, I'm Jessica McCoy here at Raising Midland, a podcast for parents in the Permian. Now, I am really lucky today because I have Dr. Stephanie Howard from MISD here with me today. And I know that there's several of you that probably have a lot of questions about MISD and where we're going. So let's get started. Hey, Dr. Howard.
Hello, how are you?
I am so excited that you're here. Like I told you, I'm a big fan of public education, and I'm so glad that you're here. So thank you for joining
thank you.
us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So let's just like paint a picture for me. What does your day look like? Because in my head, this is what I'm thinking. I think you wake up in the morning and your phone is already buzzing. Is that the case for you?
Absolutely. So every day is different.
Mhm.
That's one thing I love about the work. I get up early because I get up early to make sure I can get a workout in before I get to work. Uh, yeah, I've learned that over the years, if I don't do that, I'm certainly not going to do it at the end of the day, whenever that end of the day might be. So get up early, take time for that. And then, of course, you're right. As I start getting ready for the day and, my phone's already going off and things are happening, and that's just part of it. But that is, again, one of the things I really love. I am very intentional about scheduling time out on campuses every week because it's easy in my role to get so busy with all the other things that you forget the real work at hand, which is out on campuses, out with our students, our team, our principals. And so I schedule that into the week every single week. And yeah, so of course, working with the school board, that's one of the teams that I work alongside. And then, of course, working directly with my cabinet and, just Team Midland ISD, if you will.
So you have like not only your schools that you're responsible of, which how many schools are under MISD?
We have 39 campuses. We'll open our 40th next year with the bond. Yes.
That is wild. I can't, I'm sorry, that is so intimidating. I can just imagine, like, I only have 6 employees in my day job.
Right.
And managing and helping them be their best. I mean, that
Yeah.
in itself is difficult. So it sounds like you really are. I really appreciate your take on being so intentional with like kind of making sure that you're touching base with your principals. Do you like have to meet with principals when you go to campuses? Are you really interested in hearing from teachers directly? Like, how are you
Right.
doing those touch points when you're there?
Yes, a couple of different ways. If I'm just going to visit a
Mhm.
campus, typically I'll drop in. Sometimes they know I'm coming, sometimes they don't. Always check in with the principal. Principals are busy. I was a principal for 9 years, so I know what that role is like. If they're available, we walk classrooms together. If they're not, I say, "Hey, I just stopped by. I'm going to visit a few classrooms and."
Wow.
Visit. It's kind of organic, really. It's not typically a planned type visit. We also do instructional rounds. Those
Mhm.
are more planned, more scheduled. We know that, who all's going to be there. We're going to go see multiple classrooms, come back and debrief and be real intentional with that time. But then we also, I do listen and learns on every campus. So I came back in January of 2023, had to get 39 of them in a semester. That was pretty intense, but have been able to these
Yes.
last 2 years to spread those out, typically from around September until spring break.
Wow.
And so those are after school,
Okay. Well, you only
typically.
have so many hours in a day.
Right. And there's only so many 4 o'clock slots a day, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm like
Yes.
thinking, how do you, I mean, you must have like I'm a very big calendar person.
Yes.
So I can imagine you probably have everything color coded. And then
Absolutely.
you have to switch in the moment from like going from talking to a principal to talking to a teacher who
Right.
that's a different communication style in general.
Sure.
That's amazing. You wear a lot of hats.
Yes. And so at the Listen and Learns, that's the whole team from that campus. So all the teachers, the principal, assistant principal, counselors, custodians, everyone that works at the campus. And those we have the opportunity to share what's going on in the district. We talk about our strategic plan, where we are with that. We're 18 months into that work. We talk about how we're doing with those various projects. And then they have the opportunity to share with me and my team because cabinet goes as well. Because,
Mhm.
you talked about how busy it
Yeah,
is. I have to rely on a great team and I have a great team. And so
right.
they go and then we listen to the campus, what's working well, here at the campus or within the district, and then what are things we need to do better.
I mean,
And
that can be so enlightening because, you know, I really appreciate where you're coming from because I know that not all superintendents do that. Coming from my mom was in Fort Bend ISD in Houston for a long
yeah,
time. That's where she started her baby teaching career.
right,
And then she moved to Austin ISD. And to see the vast difference between those two independent school districts was very interesting. I remember her telling me that Fort Bend, this is back in the 90s, I'm not dogging on them now, 80s and 90s, that Fort Bend ISD had such a huge growth that they were spread really, really thin for a long, long time. And
right,
then moving to Austin ISD was a lot, it's actually a lot similar back when it was 2004 was when we moved. And it was very interesting to get her perspective as a teacher because their superintendent at Austin ISD was very much like you, who was kind of like really
right,
checking in with cabinet, checking in with their board, but then also going to schools and actually observing. And for a lot of people, and just so you know, you if you're not familiar with public education, it's not always normal for a superintendent to be that involved.
right,
So to hear from my mom's perspective as a teacher and then administrator, to hear her perspective of these different ISDs and how they deal with things, it sounds like you're very intentional. And I know that
yes,
you've inherited such a microcosm. I don't know if that's the best way to describe MISD, but in my head, there's so much going on and there's so much growth. And much like all of Midland, honestly, that's reflective of where our city is. I know Lori Blong and I have had conversations just offline
right,
talking about the growth of Midland. And there's just so much gas behind it. And I'm not talking about the oil and gas industry,
right,
but there's so much momentum
yes,
behind it that it takes a very strategic person to make sure that it's not just we're going forward without checks and balances. And it
right,
sounds like you're really getting feedback to make those decisions, to really, talk about what is the validity of some of these changes that are being proposed and
right.
is this going to work? Because that I would assume would help you make more informed decisions, right?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I love about those campus visits is our teachers engage. And, because I spent 10 years, I was here for 14 years before being gone 10 and then coming back, been here a little over 2 years now, entering year three. So, one of the things I truly love is knowing our team. And there's not a campus I can go to that I don't know people there. We can
That's
walk into
nice.
classrooms, but if we don't listen to them, we're not able to make the adjustments that truly impact them in the classroom and ultimately our students. And so the other thing that we do is when we get that feedback, if there's something they're needing or something they're struggling with, the expectation is we turn that around quickly.
That's awesome. So
And
what does that actually look like? So for example, I know something that's really big. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I feel like it's relevant. Schools are really overcrowded right now. I have a lot of friends who worked in public education, not just in Midland
right,
ISD, but also everywhere. I know teachers are strapped. I know from personal experience, my mom was getting paid less than $50,000 for the majority of her career and then was doing summer school to subsidize her crayon and her like pencils that she had to purchase.
right,
Because what a lot of people don't realize is that a teacher's salary is what it is, but then also all of the materials that are given, they're not given to the teacher by the MISD because that's
right,
not the independent school district's role.
mm,
So those teachers have to purchase those items for
mhm,
themselves in their classrooms.
yeah,
So, that can be really difficult for a teacher. So if let's say, you have a teacher that is really struggling to afford for whatever reason the materials that they need that are necessary for their classrooms. If you were to take that piece of advice, how does the workflow look like for you and your team? How do you take that, feedback? How do you guys kind of determine next steps? And then
mhm.
how do you find a result?
Yeah. So first of all, I do expect that our campuses provide
Oh,
those
that's
types of
great.
things for our teachers.
Just so you know, that's
Now,
also
yeah.
not, I'm not just trying to do a puff piece for you guys,
Uh,
but like that's not always the case.
right.
And I think it's important to acknowledge.
Yes. So teachers by nature, I was a teacher. We love to go buy school supplies. I still like to go buy school supplies.
I like the
And
whole thing before school and
right.
yeah.
And so, even with my own daughter, if
Mhm.
if they send out a list that the PTA is going to, provide the supplies, I'm like, no, I want to go buy my own supplies.
Mhm.
But we do expect that our campuses provide those things in the classroom that our teachers need. In fact, when I got back, we had a number of teachers going to donors choose, and we took that off of that's not an option.
Okay, wait. So like let's refer back. A lot of the people that listen to our podcasts are will watch this. I know this is probably going to be a little millennial. I'm so sorry. But on Instagram there's a girl who has an Instagram called Things I Bought and Liked, and she
Hmm.
is a girl out of Houston, and she will take those lists from teachers, and she actually partners using her social media platform with Amazon and
Right.
all these big brands that will clear out those lists. And what you're saying is that you guys will do that for our own teachers so that our teachers don't have to do that. That's
Right. So
fantastic.
what we were finding is they were going to that platform
Uh-huh.
before they were talking to the campus,
Wow.
principal or secretary that could get them what they needed. So we wanted to make sure that they weren't out having to do that when it was something we could buy and provide for them. And so we kind of closed that gap. That is not something out on the campuses that I hear. They don't talk about that. In fact, we do surveys, and I think over 83% said they had the resources they needed. And so, having been at the campus level, it's just really important that they know how to go about getting things.
Yeah,
And
because I can imagine, like, no offense, but like you being the superintendent, your position is kind of intimidating for maybe like a second year teacher to
right.
be like, Dr. Howard, like, I
Yeah.
might need this. Like, that might be
Right.
intimidating, especially if you're a little, a new teacher,
Hmm.
or even if you're a seasoned teacher, sometimes it can be difficult to escalate things because you're not sure if that's the hill you want to die on,
Right.
because, you want to make sure that if you're doing any large communication to upper management,
Right.
right, it has to be a good reason. So that's
Yeah.
really great that you guys are really checking in often
Yeah.
so that none of those things that they may need, well, as much as you can, obviously, you can't
Right.
solve everything, but you're really checking in because you're providing more touch points. And the more you provide more touch points, the more likely your teachers and administrators are going to be more comfortable talking
Right.
with you.
Yeah, they are very comfortable. That I haven't run into any shy ones yet, and I think that's because of the relationship I try to build with them. Many of them I've worked with, for years, and so we also have the role of principal supervisor, and those our principal supervisors have about 10 to 12 campuses that they're out on weekly.
Okay, so you, principal supervisors,
Right.
uh, vice principals, teachers?
So principal supervisors are over our principals and
Okay,
over
cool.
our campuses.
Great. Okay.
And so, that's really important. And the whole role of that is to provide that support that they need, the coaching, all of that. But if they see something that's a problem, letting me know that or solving it themselves. Also, we have the Education Foundation.
Tell me a bit about that because I've seen so many different commercials and social media things and about that, and I don't fully understand what is the role of the Midland Education Foundation
Right,
because there's so, and I mean this is kind of a blessing but also very unique to Midland. I'm sure you've
right.
lived here for a while, but we have so many foundations that sometimes it's difficult to understand what everybody does.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about the Midland Education
Well,
Foundation.
they actually office in our building.
Okay.
And so Anita Gammertsfelder is their director, and she does a great job. We've known each other for, 20, 25 years. And she has a couple of people on her team. They also office in our building. And so one of the things they do that goes along with what we were just talking about is they have grants for great ideas and then micro grants. And so our
Okay.
teachers have the opportunity to submit for those grants. Those are $500 to $1,000
Mhm.
grants typically. And when they're needing things for their classroom, and this is one of the things I share on the campus, it's not so much that the principal couldn't provide it for that teacher, But if every teacher on campus wanted it, they might not could provide it for every campus.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of projects or ideas or innovative things that our teachers are trying to do that sometimes are better funded through the Education Foundation. But they do a great job. They support our teachers, they support our schools, our
Wow.
students, and just another source of support and financial assistance for our team.
So the Midland Education Foundation, is it a 50C4 or is it a
I
501c3?
think it's a 501c3.
Okay, so that just so you guys know, a 501c3 is usually privately funded. You have organizations or companies that will come in and they're able to donate. Whereas a 501c4, there's differences. That's more government based,
Mhm.
where sometimes you can get government funding, but that's not what it is.
Yeah,
So that's really fantastic. So that means like companies, like I know that Diamondback's a really big supporter. Travis Stice,
absolutely.
he just recently stepped down at Diamondback, but he graduated from Midland Legacy Lee. So I know that he's really, really supportive of public education. I know Case Van Hoff is as well.
Right,
But having that homegrown, like, building of our public school system it just can't come from the state or the federal
right,
government all the time.
right.
So it's great that, we have organizations that are really supporting that. That's
Yes.
great.
Yeah,
So tell
you
me,
you
go ahead.
mentioned Diamondback, very supportive. So groups like that will make donations through the Education Foundation
Mhm.
many times because it is that nonprofit. Um,
I know Ashley Conduit goes out on campuses a lot, and
yes.
I know,
Yeah.
please forgive me, Ashley, if I'm not getting this correct, but I know that Diamondback and other companies like Oxy and Chevron and ConocoPhillips as well have been really helping you guys focus on STEM education.
Yes.
So I'm sure that they donate like Chromebooks or special science days,
Right,
right?
absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up
Yeah.
because Days of Allah Elementary is actually in planning this year to launch as a STEM school next year.
Okay, wait. I would love to know more about
Yes.
that because I want to
So,
talk all the way
right,
about, Young Women's Leadership Academy, Carver, all of those things. So
right.
tell me.
So, STEM Academy, neighborhood school. So, it's still serving our students in the Days of Allah neighborhood, but providing that unique programming with a STEM approach. And so, real excited about that. We also launched officially, we're able to announce STEM+M, which is going to be new next year at our junior highs. And so,
All of them?
that's, yes,
Oh, wow. So STEM plus M. What's the other M?
medicine, the
Whoa.
medical.
Okay, so this
Yes,
makes sense. So I know that Young Women's Leadership Academy partnered with Diamondback, I think,
right.
to do something with neuroscience. And Kate Williamson and I were talking about that, how they're using technology to basically expose children to different, obviously,
With
young.
Siglass and
Yes,
yes.
and what this is it basically helps basically introduce their students to STEM or STEAM, and then also introducing them to the medicine side. So you're
Right.
telling me that all middle schools in MISD are now going to have access to this? That's
Correct.
great.
So, and I want to give credit where credit is due. The Scarborough Foundation is
Oh,
funding and supporting that.
wonderful.
It's a partnership with the Baylor College of Medicine.
Okay, wow, that's
Yes.
amazing.
And
So I hold on. I'm just I did not know that. That's fantastic
yes.
for one thing. So you're really for one thing, let me make sure I'm summarizing. You're providing an equitable solution so that all students in MISD have access to high quality STEAM education and
Absolutely.
as well with this new wing, I guess is what you could call
Right.
it for introduction to medicine concepts. And what's really important to understand too, I know I'm practicing, like I'm preaching to the choir here, but the reason why it's so important is because the more you expose your children to these different, I guess, industries, right? The less likely they are to make fast decisions when they're about to go to college, which could
Right.
reduce total spend for them if they're having to switch majors all the time. I
That's
am
right.
guilty. I started out as a medicine major, ended up, majoring in English and sociology.
Right.
Like at the end of the day, we want our students to actually have some level of concepts of what they want to do. And it's a little bit difficult if they're not exposed to it. So you
Right.
guys are really exposing that such a young age with middle school.
Yes.
So tell me, how did Baylor get involved? Because that's
So,
amazing.
right. So Dan Horde actually approached one of our school board members at the time. This has been about a year in the making. So we
Wow.
started working on this about a year
You're
ago.
wearing perfect Baylor colors too.
Yes, I am. And so they brought in some representatives from the Baylor College of Medicine. We met, talked about what the opportunities were and possibilities. And There was initial thought about maybe we do it at one junior high, and I said I want to do it at all four. And so what will happen now is our seventh graders have access to neuroscience. That'll be the class that they take as their elective. And I actually ran into a parent a couple of weeks ago. We couldn't officially announce it, but we're already talking to students about course selections, academic planning for next year, and they were so excited their daughter had signed up for neuroscience. And then in eighth grade, they'll take biomedical science. And then, of course, when they get into high school, they start, the 4 years of math, 4 years of science. But we'll have eight seniors each year that'll have the opportunity to go to Houston to do work there with the Baylor College of Medicine. Yes, they will actually have faculty, a person out here that is our representative that will coach our teachers, support our teachers, and we'll have some teachers that'll have the opportunity to go for additional staff development as well during the summer.
That is crazy. I know all the science teachers are like rejoicing.
Yes.
My mom was a science teacher,
Right.
and she was actually helped write some of the textbooks for Texas Education Fund or like the TEA. I don't know. Please forgive me with all the acronyms that y'all have to go by, but she loved doing all of her different science, like I guess units is what they call them.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, I'm a teacher who's a middle school teacher at SJ. I think that's middle school, right?
Yes.
My kids are too little, so I'm trying to understand. And I have to do this. How am I going to be fully equipped to be able to teach these units? So you said that Baylor,
They will have a coach.
okay, so they'll have a coach.
Right.
And how is that curriculum being written? I'm like obsessed with understanding curriculum and understanding where it comes from. A lot of people don't realize that it's not MISD creating the curriculum, it's the state of Texas, and it
Right.
has to be approved across the state of Texas. And there's tons of that happens during the summer.
Right.
So I'm curious, how are who wrote the curriculum? And these coaches, how are these coaches going to equip and empower the teachers to follow that curriculum?
Right. So it's just the partnership with Baylor College of Medicine. And then, of course, the coursework teachers will be engaged in that, supported in that. And that's the unique part. Many times in education, we try to launch something, but there isn't that support. And that's been something that's been really important. And a key part of our strategic plan is that job embedded coaching, that ongoing support, not just for this, but for everything to be able to make sure that we equip our team to be successful.
That's great. Now, on that note, let's pivot slightly. I am so curious. I'm a product of a magnet school. I don't even know if that's like the right word, but
We call
basically,
it choice
choice
now.
school. Okay. Yeah. Kate Williamson told me about that. I
Yep.
remember. Okay. So I started off doing private school at a Catholic school in Houston, John Paul II Catholic school. And then we moved to Houston and I moved with my mom and went into Fort Bend ISD at Oyster Creek Elementary.
Right.
And then we moved to Austin and I did 1 year in public school. And then I moved into a magnet school
Right.
or choice school.
Right.
My choice school was pre-law, so we did a lot of humanities, and I was able to get 2 years ahead in English so that I could skip 2 grades. So when I was a freshman in high school, I just went to a regular high school. But the problem is the infrastructure at that high school was not prepared to take a freshman who was already ready to test for AP3 English.
Right.
So that caused a lot of, and this was back when, all the state of Texas was really thinking about choice schools. Like, this is not something that's new, right? And I know in the
No.
span of your career, you could probably attest to that as well. So the idea of a choice school has been around for a while. I'm the product of that. So I'm prefacing that for this next question. Please explain to me, why is it important to have so many different levels of choice schools in an independent school district? We have the Young Women's Leadership Academy,
Right.
right? We also have Carver. And we also have Sarah Judge, who's a friend of mine. I think works very closely with the Midland Education Foundation. I might
Right.
be wrong. But she was explaining to me also, we have a school, I think it's an elementary school that does Spanish
Ben Milam
immersion.
International Academy. It's a dual language school, so they learn both languages.
Wow. Okay.
And
So why is it important to have these types of schools? for
Because to
families?
have so many options, every family, is looking for something different. We have the Bowie Fine Arts Academy, that's very successful. Early college, high school for students who want to, they already know. I wasn't that student. I didn't know what I wanted to do in ninth grade, but some do, and they move into that early college, high school, and graduate with an associate's degree. But there's also so much choice within our schools, and I want to talk a little bit about that. You've referenced middle school, and because of Bond 2023, we're now going to have true middle schools. So right now we have
So
junior
6 to
highs.
8?
Right,
Okay.
right.
That's
So
no offense, but, like, that's something that I was a little confused about when I
yes,
moved to Midland because I had never been to a school district that had, like, 6th grade as elementary school, but I
yes.
also kinda get it because 6th graders, like,
Well,
frontal lobe is not all there, you know
so
what I mean?
with Bond 2023, one of the key pieces that has always hinged on being able to do grade reconfiguration is having high schools that could serve 9 through 12. And so with Bond 2023, building a new Midland High School, a new Legacy High School that will serve students 9 through 12. We will no longer have the freshman campuses. We're going to be able to convert two campuses. The current Midland freshman will become a third middle school for the purple side of town, and the current Legacy High School will become a third middle school for the maroon side of town. So now we have room to bring sixth graders up, so we'll have that true middle school opportunity. And then that frees up space at the elementaries for growth as well as pre-K expansion.
Interesting. So having that additional school choice also can help kids kind of figure out I mean that's so much shifting.
Right,
Like so I also understand too as a business owner, you can't just expand and just say if you build it they will come.
right,
So the reason why the bond has been so important is because you've been able to do this strategically and you've been able to expand without over expanding and then putting pressure on the taxpayers
right,
for even more money when
right.
maybe we didn't need that school. So it's interesting how everything is shifting. So thank you for
Yes.
explaining.
Well, and so going back to the choice, you think about our two high schools, and when we open those up, that'll be about 3,800 students on the campuses. And so, what I love about that, now I grew up in a small community. I graduated with 22,
Wow.
but spent 8.5 years of my career at what was then Lee High School. And then, of course, taught at Midland High the first year I was here. And what I truly love about those schools is the amount of choice they're able to
So
provide.
explain that to me because what I struggled with was going from a very, I mean, let's just compare it to Carver. Okay. I
Right,
went from a school like Carver and then it felt just my opinion, it felt like I was going into the wolves in regular high school because the infrastructure was not there to support how far I was
right,
in my English and in my history. I mean, I was ready to take my AP exams as a
mhm,
freshman. So it was so difficult because the teachers were a little frustrated with that. And again, this
yeah,
was when it was in its infancy. We've had 15 years now to kind of flush that out as a
right,
state. So how are you guys supporting students, let's say from Bowie Fine Arts or Carver, Young Women's
yeah.
Leadership Academy? Well, that's a whole other thing. But they have to be able to be supported as high school students. So how is that
Right.
working?
So first of all, I'll start with middle school and junior high right now, but middle school eventually, and that's going to be really exciting to get our sixth graders up. We made some transitions this year. With the mindset that it's not fair to our current sixth graders and our
Hmm.
current ninth graders that
Hmm.
they are not yet in that grade reconfiguration. So, making sure we give them as many of the opportunities that a middle school student would have or a high school student would have, even though they're not sitting there yet.
Right.
And so we have advanced math at all of our elementaries. The state required that this year.
Okay.
That has been a big challenge for us because they sit at an elementary. So getting our sixth graders up is going to really help with that. But when they transition into our junior highs, on the fine arts side, we offer band, choir, and orchestra. That's not, where our campuses are big enough that we are able to offer all of that programming, art classes, theater, and then, of course, at the high school level, the dance, very successful dance programs. This year, our ninth graders were able to try out for the dolls and stars, and they haven't been able to do that before. They had to wait till they became a 10th grader. And so, trying to give those real opportunities. Mariachi band at
Yes.
Legacy, they're only in their second year and they've been to state
Oh,
both
really?
years.
I love ballet folklorio because I had a
Yes,
friend who got a scholarship at University of Texas to do ballet folklorio for University of Texas.
right.
So if you're into that, UT actually has a program for that where
Right.
you can get a scholarship. That's fantastic.
And then on the academic side, because of the size of our schools, we're able to offer so many courses because there's students who want those courses. So advanced placement, we have a number of advanced placement courses, even in the fine arts areas.
Yeah, and that's something to note too, that the standard high school will usually have AP history, math, physics, biology,
Right.
chemistry,
English,
English, but
Spanish.
yes. And then if you do like one of the schools in Austin is they're more science focused, so they had more they had robotics.
Right.
Not every AP class that's available across the United States is available at every high school. So it sounds
Right.
like you guys are expanding upon that. That's great.
Well, in robotics, we've had that at the secondary level for years. In fact, we have students that are competing at the, area and state levels and that. Just had that competition last week. But this year, because of some of our generous sponsors that you mentioned earlier, we actually have robotics now. Second grade up across all of
What?
our campuses. And so our
That's so
elementary
cool.
students have been able to compete in robotics. And then we also added UIL academics, of course, at the high schools. We added UIL academics grades 2 up as well.
Wow.
And so now our elementary students are having those opportunities to compete in the co and extracurricular activities in both the academics, the robotics, the fine arts, the different areas that really engage our students.
That's fantastic. And all of this has happened in such a short period of time. Let's go back to the bond. So, one of the things that I know a lot of parents are wanting to make sure with all of this expansion sounds like reorgs are happening. That's really great. It sounds like you guys are really making sure that we're not just allowing the individual school choice programs to have all the advantages. It
Right,
sounds like you're making it far more equitable than it was in past years. That's
right,
great. Let's talk about safety. So, one of the things that I always struggled with as a student and also millennial, we have always known unprecedented events, right?
right,
I was in second grade when 9/11 happened. And, people in high school a couple years ago, before me that were in high school during Columbine, all of these things are super important. And as a child of a teacher and administrator, I was always very concerned about my mom's
right.
safety. Towards the end of my mom's career, she was working at Idea Academy in Austin.
Hmm.
So, I understood the pressures of a student as well, who is at a high level doing AP classes. And, that can cause a lot of children to really struggle with their mental health. And I'm not a big believer at just saying the word mental health. It's very layered, but
Right.
just in general, how are you guys approaching safety and how are you guys approaching mental health within your students? If we're offering all of these incredibly dynamic programs, that could potentially lead to a mental health care crisis for a child.
Right.
And then how are we addressing that in relation to safety improvements that the bond was suggesting?
Yeah, well, you certainly just dated me because
Big
I
question.
was an assistant principal when 9/11 happened at Midland Freshman. I
Hmm.
remember the very room I was in a meeting, and when we found out what was happening, really didn't know what was happening, but were starting to get that news. So many of our campuses were built in the 50s, and there's been some bonds over the years that have there was a bond years ago that closed in the campuses because they
Mm.
used to be open and you walked outside to get to your class. Bond 2023 is going to really elevate that safety and security aspect. And so I'll start with the two new high schools. The two high schools we have now, one, some of the original parts of it were built in the 20s. And then Legacy High School opened in 1961. And so when you think about the time back then, there wasn't a concern for this, and so they were not designed with the newest safety, in mind. And so these campuses are going to have the controlled access and access points that visitors come in one area, and we've done that. We've closed off all of our campuses, and doors are locked. But the campuses aren't designed for that to really work the way that it
And there's only
should.
so much you can do if the whole building isn't really designed for it. So that
Correct.
makes sense to why we have to move schools. Like we have to
Right.
build what we need.
Right. And so those will be able to be built. In fact, we just approved, or the board approved, the educational specifications Tuesday night. And those specifications, one big component is the safety standards in which we will build all of our new schools, safety standards in which we will use when we renovate schools. And so Right now, just on CBS 7 last night, there was actually a story because even though Midland High is going to move and we're going to have a new Midland High, we have 3 more years in there. And so
Mhm.
they've added a secured vestibule because they didn't have one. Legacy Freshman's another campus that will not be a campus that we use after the bond, but we've added that secured vestibule because we have 3 more years in there and we can't,
Is that like, not to be crass, but is that like a safe room?
so a secured vestibule is when visitors come in. So like if you went to visit a campus, you come in, you check in, and then you're allowed to go where you need to go on the campus if you even need to. And so that was one of the first programs within our bond that got started. We had about 8 elementary campuses that did not have secured vestibules. Right. And so that
Our schools are old. Like, we're trying to do our best economically, or like, to think through fiscally, so that we're fiscally responsible.
Yes. I was at a campus just this week, and the campus was built in the 40s.
Wow.
And so, very different
Yeah.
time, and people just came in, maybe any door they
Yeah,
wanted.
no joke.
And so now all of our exterior doors are locked. We do have those main entrances, but we've had to retrofit, if you will. Whereas when you're building new and designing from the beginning, you can actually do that in the way that it should be. And so the fencing, the new high schools will have perimeter fencing all the way around them. Uh, Oh, yes. And we've already, in fact, that safety and security part of the bond on our existing campuses will be complete probably next month. And so we've already added cameras, technology controlled access. And when we have all of the controlled access in at all of our campuses, the newest technology actually allows for an alert if a door were to be left open. You get an alert so you can address that right away.
Does every school in MISD have like an officer,
Yes.
or is
So
that the plan?
that's the plan. So House Bill 3 a couple of years ago required an officer at every campus.
Okay.
Our new police chief, Chief McCowan, he's grown the department. He's tripled the size of the department in
That's
a little
amazing.
over a year.
Wow, in a
And
year?
yes.
Wow.
And so that's great. We're down to needing about 6 more officers. So we
Okay.
do have about 6 campuses
Yeah, but what an
that
improvement.
split. Absolutely.
Like, wow, that's amazing. Like, I'm just hiring people always talk about
Right.
hiring people in Midland. I've never personally had that issue, but because I mean, if you're trying to protect children, who's not going to sign up for that?
Right.
You know?
We've had very good luck
It's
hiring
amazing.
officers. One of the things we're working with the state right now is that was an unfunded mandate or an underfunded mandate. So it's costing us about 3 million that's not flowing from the state to expand the department to that size. And of course,
Wow.
the payroll that's associated, but also vehicles and equipment and training and the command staff that's required for a department of that size.
Wow. So, pivoting from that first part of that question is how, with all of these diverse changes that you guys are offering to students, I always like to think of, that's a lot of pressure to put on children to take all these really interesting courses, right? It's one thing on paper to sign your
Right.
kid up for neurobiology, or, sorry, biotechnology, classes, right? How is MISD approaching mental health within students? And like I said, I'm trying to not just use this as a generic term,
Sure.
but generally speaking, how are we talking about children, about their stress, and how are we trying to communicate to our students and their parents
Mhm.
about what they can do to help their children,
Right.
just in general, but then also if they're going to take these advanced classes?
Sure. So we have, of course, counselors at every campus. Some campuses have multiple counselors depending on their size. And then we have a director of counseling at the district level and then a coordinator of mental health and works very closely, especially with our elementary schools. And one thing that they've been working on is building out the scope and sequence, if you will. So we use that in the classroom, but what is it that we want our students to receive from the counselors when they're in kindergarten and first grade and second grade? We also have implemented, this is our second year to use iLead, which is a leadership development John Maxwell program.
Mm-hmm.
We started that last year on some of our campuses, but this year we're using that across the district. And so thinking about equipping them with those leaderships, qualities,
To stand up
um,
against bullying, and I'm
right,
very familiar with
how to
Maxwell.
advocate for themselves, all of
Communicate.
that in a proactive approach,
Great.
right? And then, of course, we do a lot with parent engagement. So our PTAs have grown this year,
That's
and
great.
we're over 6,000 PTA members in the district, and so really trying to engage with our community, engage with our parents. It's all a partnership, and so if a student's struggling, parents know when to reach out so that we can check on the student. And then also our teachers do a great job. When they see a student struggling, they're gonna find out what's going on and work with them, and those relationships that our students have with their teachers, their coaches, their band directors, their
Mhm.
counselors. But those counselors are so critical, and they serve a very big role. Of course, our director of nursing works in the same department as our director of counseling.
Mhm.
So thinking about how we bring that work together. We have nurses on every campus, and our
Nice.
bigger campuses have more than one, and so sometimes the nurse may see something before the counselor does. And so it's just
Well, it takes a village,
yes, and a
and it's
coordinated effort.
yeah, and I think what's also beneficial too is by adding in these medicine, I guess units that people can take at, middle school,
Hmm.
right? And above, it might also help give kids just more opportunities to be able to understand themselves. And also by offering all of these different options of advanced placement, school choice,
Right,
and to be able to offer these different classes, I feel like it could also help children understand themselves a little bit more. And by providing more opportunities, sometimes we can improve our mental health by
right,
being able to show that, if you want to leave Midland, you can through, maybe
right.
doing a technical institute instead
Hmm.
of college. I
Yeah,
think it has to do with, I think what can really impact, and this is just my personal opinion, I think what can really impact children's mental health is by opening the doors a little bit
right.
and being able to show the opportunity that's available. But then also, it's, that's cute to offer that, right? It's
Yeah,
another thing to offer the infrastructure and then the
right,
follow up.
right,
So it really sounds like you guys are doing that. And I know that the bond, while we're doing our best to make sure that it's fiscally responsible, I know that this bond truly is.
right,
But then also having the infrastructure with your leadership and how you're communicating with your, all the different levels of staff that you have, it really sounds like you're not just saying, here's the bond. Okay, cool. We're going to move forward. We're going to do all these things. There's actually more steps behind it to make sure that it's successful. And that's fantastic.
right.
On that,
There's
yeah,
there's a couple of things I want to mention that
please.
makes me think of. One thing I'm really proud that we do here in the district, because sometimes the bigger a district is or the bigger a school is, that you lack that personal connection.
Mhm.
Our counselors, we're in academic planning right now, so talking to our sixth graders coming up to seventh grade, our every student thinking about what's next year,
Mhm.
what's their 4 year and 6 year plan. Our counselors sit with every student during this time and talk to them about their course selections. And that's when they can say, this is a really heavy load, and you're also in athletics or band or
Checks and balances.
right, and have those conversations. And so I'm real proud about that. As far as the bond and how we're going about communicating that, just yesterday we had our sixth bond advisory committee. And so when we were in bond planning, one of the things I told the bond planning team was, when we pass a bond, that we would put together a bond advisory committee that we would meet with quarterly throughout the process until the every last project is done. And so we do that. We also communicate that out to our parents, our staff, our team, community. Bond 2023 is the website. Midland Bond 2023. We have a financial dashboard. And that's updated in real time as we're processing payments
That's
and then
amazing.
also progress on the projects.
So there's a lot of transparency with that. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I'm just so thankful for your time. Just in a quick, I know
Yeah.
you have a meeting and I
Yeah.
don't want to keep you too long, but just very quickly, what gives you hope for the future of Midland from your perspective?
I think what gives me the most hope is our team. Uh, I'm out on campuses all the time, and we have a team that is committed, dedicated. The morale is great, and just so appreciative of their work. And coming back to Midland, you don't always get lucky. And this is my third superintendency. You don't always get lucky with the team that's saying, hey, whatever we need to do, let's do it. And this is a team. And when I talk
Awesome.
about that, we have about 3,500 employees, and there's not, I don't run into any of them that don't want to do what's right for kids and what's best for kids. And the extra work to really provide that great student experience. And so that gives me hope. The strategic plan, we're 18 months into that, seeing some very good progress there. Great leadership on our campuses. Teachers are our number one impact on student outcomes, and we have a 98% fill rate, which is
That's
not the
amazing.
situation I
Goodness.
inherited. And then just the principal leaders. We have the right people leading our
What was the
campuses.
fill rate before you came here?
It was, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, no
It's
one
okay.
could give me that number.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
but we had one.
we'll assume it's less than
It
98%.
was. Well, one example was South Elementary. I had to hire a principal right after I got here. We didn't have a principal at South. And when we got our new principal a couple of weeks after I started, she inherited 22 vacancies in the middle of the year. And now, now she's staffed up, fully staffed. They went from an F to a B last year. And
Wow.
so
Well, the
just,
progress you've made, I mean, with me just living here for 9 years now, but just seeing you grow has just been incredible. I'm so thankful that you were able to talk with us. I'm hoping that it provides a different perspective than what all these other interviews that you've done
yes.
has been able to offer. But thank you so much for coming. And I'm so thankful for your time. And I'm really hoping that everyone just continues to follow the progress that the bond is making.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time.
Anytime. Thanks, guys, so much. We appreciate you guys tuning in and make sure that you subscribe. Bye.